difference is that the engagement that I had was directly through a sales relationship rather than a knowledge relationship. So I guess one of the distinguishing differences for me is that rather than trying to be sold a solution, I was actually buying a capability or using a capability. So that to me was one of the major differences. I mean, I ended up with an output from that didn't quite muster, but that aside, the technical engagement was still a similar process in that we had people come into our office and ask some questions, which we obviously answered, but not fully understanding the context of our workplace and our environment was probably one of the things that was missing and generated a bit of an issue for us. We also think up front that the expectation wasn't set clearly as to what I was really wanting out of it and what they were intending on delivery. I think we both worked on assumptions. So one of the differences here was that we were pretty clear and upfront and open about some of the challenges that we faced in the prior engagement and then what needed to be done this time around, not to necessarily fall into the same traps as we had prior. So one of the big things is a lot of background knowledge about ERP systems in general, and then obviously another advantage was your prior experience with Dynamics 365. It's not always apples and oranges. Obviously we're in the top industry, we're supporting a horticultural industry, so I always refer to those sort of references. But I guess the difference is that we relied heavily on your knowledge of prior work in a similar environment. So we sort of pulled from your strengths and your prior experiences in implementing ERP systems, and then obviously once again your particular capabilities and experience around the Dynamics 365 for F&O that we were specifically looking at, already decided to implement. So we weren't necessarily asking you to help us choose a product. We'd chosen a product. We were also relying on your prior knowledge of Dynamics 365 and to use that knowledge to help us make an informed decision about what we needed to do and who we needed to engage and bring on board for our project. The risk was obviously that some of the partners that we were talking to are organisations you dealt with previously, and I guess there is always the concern in an organisation that any decision or recommendation that's been made isn't necessarily being done without bias of some form. But from my experience, the way we went through this and the way you introduced the organisations and prior information that you had wasn't necessarily disclosed until after a decision had been made by the business. So it was more or less left to us as an organisation to make the decisions rather than relying on your recommendation to make a decision. Obviously, we had lots of discussions about things to watch out for and things to listen for and things to take into account when we're talking to these vendors, but there was definitely no push towards a particular vendor through any stage of the engagement. One of the things is that we didn't and we couldn't have brought you on a full-time basis to work solely and wholly on our project. So I think one of the things that attracted us to the engagement that we joined together to undertake our requirements gathering and selecting the partner and everything sort of helped us financially. Having the flexibility of doing an engagement where we pulled on your skills and resources as we were needed to at different stages of the project without actually bringing you on board or someone similar on a full-time basis. So that to me was a thing that actually attracted me to the engagement that we went through. One of the things with these sorts of projects is you never know how big a hole you're going to be jumping into, and we are a little bit risk adverse when it comes to spend on IT projects. So having an envelope in which the costs were constrained was something that helped me in getting the finance team engaged in bringing someone on board. They're very risk adverse, as I mentioned earlier, and having someone come in and say, we're going to have this and it's a day rate, but we have no idea how much the spend's going to be really, but we think it's about this much, would have probably been a tougher solution or a tougher way of financing that scope of work. There's always the old adage of what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know. So I guess there were a couple of situations where we've been business since the mid-80s. We've got a lot of people that have been with our organisation a hell of a long time and very used to doing things a certain way, with the exception that's the best and only way to do it. So yeah, I think we had a couple of situations where people were challenged about, although this is the way you currently do it, is that necessarily the best way, or have you considered this as an alternative method or way to achieve the same outcome, but with potentially significant less effort in trying to achieve the same thing, or using, in our particular case, this inbuilt system function capability to achieve something without having to necessarily make the system change to reflect our previous workflow or work practices and stuff like that. So yeah, we definitely had a couple of examples like that where it was challenged. You were open and challenged us in some of the decisions we were making. So yeah, for sure that did happen, and it was very much appreciated. I guess it really comes down to the person I'm speaking to and what capabilities they have within their own team. So one of the reasons why we engaged with you, David, in the first place was the fact that we're a fairly small team, a bit thin on the ground in some areas and skill sets, and we don't necessarily have the budget to keep resources like you on board full time all the time, and we would probably get you pretty bored after a while as well, because you'd be bored working on the same project for so long. So I guess it really comes down to understanding what capabilities that the other organisation would have, and if they were in a similar position to me, I would say, well, rely on the people, bring in your pinch hitters to come in to deliver the sorts of capabilities and expertise that you can't afford to keep yourself. I would say that anytime that becomes an opportunity and you have a resource like yourself that's available to be pulled from on a project like this, then they're the sorts of people you need to target. Talking less generally about having someone with your capabilities, I mean, having someone like you, I guess one of the things that I've appreciated during our relationship on this project is the fact that we have open and frank conversations. It's not a very formal, and it's the way our business operates, and the way that I guess you communicate is similar to the way we communicate also in our business. So that was, I guess, gave you a step in the door from day one in being able to communicate at the same level as our business, not necessarily walk in with a suit and tie and stand at the front and lecture to our business about how things should be done. It was more conversational, and that's the approach that was well appreciated in our business. I guess one of the other things too that needs to be considered when you're undertaking these sort of projects is just how much time and you as a business will take to do an activity, and having the flexibility of being able to allow us the right amount of time to get things prepared and undertake the commitments from staff for availability for meetings and stuff like that, I guess was something that we took advantage of. We weren't necessarily pushing and saying, oh, I'm only available these 2 days a week, and if it doesn't suit that, then we won't be able to have this meeting. It was more or less, hey guys, have a think about this. Next time we need to catch up, these are the sorts of people that need to be involved, and roughly this is a time frame we should be considering to get together next, and leaving it then to us to try and coordinate our resources internally, and then have at least some flexibility and availability was a good thing as well. From a framework perspective, I guess we have, as an organisation, or in certain parts of our organisation, been familiar with an RFP process of requirements gathering and then documenting, and then having workshops and having discussions internally before we actually even start talking to vendors about what we're trying to do. That structure is, I guess, familiar to IT and the people in my team, but very unfamiliar for the people that we engage with on this particular project for our part of the business, because they had been left alone for a long time, and their system and platform hadn't changed a lot since it was first implemented many years ago. So having someone else sometimes come in and say exactly the same thing is beneficial, and having, I guess, a structure around the process and briefing the organisation on what structure is required to get to a successful outcome was definitely something I relied on from your skill set to sort of help me educate the business as well. It really highlights the point there that we have identified potential risks that we as an organisation have faced by undertaking this project without the level of commitment that's needed to do it successfully.